It's like tale as old as time. Entrepreneur is excited about a thing. They want to build it in a certain way. They want to do it right. There's like a person who seems aligned, but like ultimately kind of isn't. Like has probably a overlapping but kind of different vision for it. Ends up through subtle and unsubtle ways influencing it towards that path. Entrepreneur gets disillusioned, no longer is happy running their own business, no longer feels at home in their own business. They probably feel shame or regret about choices they've made. They don't feel like they've done right by their customers. They don't feel like they really built the thing they wanted to build. And then they leave. And they're like, maybe they even make a lot of money out of it, but they're like, what the hell happened? Because there's something inspirational about it. There's something spiritual about building a thing that you dream of.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's actually getting emotional now. I want to build the thing I'm dreaming of. I don't want to build the thing that the money person dreams of.
Welcome to Slow Down to Speed Up, where we have real one-time coaching sessions with startup founders working through the challenges of leadership. I'm your host and executive coach, Brian Wang. Today's episode is special. We're featuring our first anonymous guest, who we'll call John. In our session, John brings up one of the most profound tensions in entrepreneurship, the relationship between control and growth. When you take venture capital, you're making a devil's bargain, trading away pieces of your company's destiny for the fuel to grow faster. John has been in startups over a decade, building multiple companies. Now with a thriving business that may not need investment, he's wrestling with this very dilemma. But every time they sit down with investors, something visceral takes over. He has this internal reaction that says, get away from my business. And John is afraid this reaction is holding him back. That's why he's here, to confront the emotional scar tissue from past rejections and the pressure to keep control over his vision. Together, we explore the push and pull of staying independent versus raising money, his deep-rooted fears of compromise, and that fierce protective instinct many founders feel toward their vision. Through our session, John begins to uncover what it means to approach these investor interactions from a place of strength, not fear. This is a powerful session on reconnecting with the core vision, navigating vulnerability, and redefining what it means to stay open while protecting what matters most. I hope you enjoy it. Hey, John, it's great to be with you today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we spoke a little bit about what you want to get into today, but why don't you spend a little bit of time sharing what you're bringing in and what you want to explore as we sit down together?
Yeah, so I think it's a scenario that a lot of entrepreneurs have been in where, I've been working in tech, starting companies or having jobs at different kind of startups phase companies for my whole career, which is over 10 years. And I've learned a lot in that time. For sure, at the beginning of my career, I was very ambitious. I was like kind of one of those right out of college entrepreneurs, and I got a lot of rejection from investors. And I think uh, now I'm in a much better position. I've got a lot more experience in my career. I'm feeling a lot more confident. And even the company that I have founded and I'm working on now is in a good spot where we may not even really need investment, but feels like it would help us grow. And it's definitely like we're down the venture path, and I'm happy with that path, and I really like that path. So I'm thinking about what the next round might look like. And as I've started talking to some investors a little bit, like kind of building early relationships and talking to our current investors, a lot of stuff is coming up that I'm realizing would be helpful for me to explore around kind of scar tissue, I think, that I
Hmm.
formed, especially early in my career and some more recent, around rejection. Um, Not only from investors, but kind of like specifically from investors is probably the best place to focus it.
Yeah.
And just the feeling of like being kind of misunderstood or underestimated, where it's so frustrating that people don't see what you see and people don't get it. And I think part of what happens, I've realized, is I found that I feel a little tense sometimes in those conversations. I feel like it's actually really hard for me to develop a lot of warm feelings or even like respect sometimes when I'm talking to investors. I don't look down on them, but I just find it hard to I think I went through a phase earlier in my career where I probably put them too much on a pedestal, and now I'm probably
Hmm.
doing too much the opposite, where it's like
Yeah.
investors really don't know anything at all, and they're here for like money, kind of a thing. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. No
uh,
offense to any investors listening to this right now.
yeah, and they know some things. There's some investors that are really great to work with. Of course,
Yeah.
like intellectually, I know that, but emotionally, in the moment when I'm talking to an investor and I'm realizing like in the moment I'm kind of like losing respect for them. They're not really following. They're not keeping up.
Hmm.
I sort of pre-reject them before they have a chance to reject me, which is a
Yeah.
common I think emotional survival strategy that happens when people have been through rejection. Is it's like, once bitten, twice shy, or whatever. Like,
Right. Right.
I'll reject you before you can reject me, kind of a thing. Um, and I feel like it would probably be useful for me to talk through a lot of this stuff so that I can go through whatever fundraise process may happen at some point in the nearish future, um, more balanced, more grounded, more open to people just being awesome, because there are a
Yeah.
lot of awesome investors out there. And also, like, yeah, there are certainly not great investors, but not to like, have it really affect me so much if someone
Sure.
uh just, isn't picking up what I'm putting down in conversation. It's not necessarily an indictment of me or them. It's just not a fit probably, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
Um so probably the one last thing I'll put on this is and I think overall this is a healthy thing, but it's interesting to think through is I think one layer deeper is like how this feeling of like a fundraise is going to be hard emotionally affects my
Hmm.
overall strategy. Because I think there is a world, in 2021 and around then when people were just raising enormous sums really easily, seemingly, and kind of messing up their companies in the process,
Yeah.
raising with enormous valuations. And I definitely don't want to do that. But I think there's also, it is possible, especially if you are like committed to the venture path, to go too far to the other extreme, where you're in survival mode, you're in cockroach mode, and the company, it's kind of like too hungry to eat kind of a thing, where
Yeah.
you don't have enough resources to actually like do your plan,
Yeah.
and it's
There's like
just
this
kind of
pure scarcity thing going on.
exactly. And
Hmm.
so I think there's part of it is about just I want to go into a fundraise process, with good chances of building great relationships and resonating with good people and all that kind of stuff, and getting the
Yeah.
capital I need or want to accelerate the business. But also, there's kind of this feeling of like, what if I didn't think a fundraise was such a, alternating between annoying and frustrating or scary thing, and I thought of it more as something that could be uh, a useful, like more of an option. It's like it's a not an
Hmm.
easy option necessarily, but like it's not like a dark corner of the entrepreneurship journey. It's more of
Yeah.
like yeah,
Yeah.
that's a thing that's totally there and doesn't have to.
Yeah.
We don't have to shape our whole strategy around avoiding needing to do it or something. You know what
Totally.
I mean?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, wow. So there's a lot to unpack in what you just shared. And so, like in no particular order, I just want to reflect a little bit before we dive in. I know a lot of founders who can relate to exactly what you're describing, John. This whole sense of like, wow, like fundraising as a function of the founder seat, the CEO seat, is dark and scary and painful and terrible. And it's interesting because I actually know quite a few founders who enjoy it.
Yeah.
They take delight in it, and
It's like
it's
the total opposite for
fascinating.
some people. They're like
Yeah.
really good at fundraising, and sometimes there's people who are amazing at fundraising and like not so good at the other parts of running
That's
a
right.
company.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you have the
And
opposite
there's some people who
problem
are great
of
at both. So
yeah,
yeah.
that's right. So and I bring that up because what occurs to me is that it's possible to inhabit and embody different orientations and perspectives on
Mm,
that whole thing, right? And when I go back to what you were sharing, John, this whole sense of I mean the first thing that strikes me as I'm listening to you is that you're really well aware of yourself in terms of the mental emotional patterns that you have. You mentioned
mm,
scar tissue. You're even like very articulate in describing. Yeah, there's like some self defense going on there, defensive reactions there,
yeah.
right? And so my intuition tells me that what we'll look at is probably going to go a little bit underneath that surface,
Yeah.
like below just like the intellectual cognitive knowing of it. But maybe just to set the stage here for a moment, if we can just articulate it, like if you were to go and just define in words uh, the the attitude that you want to
Mm,
bring into a fundraise, how would you describe it?
great question. Um, I would say openness to feedback while at the same time not it doesn't necessarily change our plans, but there could be interesting stuff that's worth looking into deeper or doing something with.
Hmm.
Um, I would say openness to some investors being really great and being like a really positive force for the trajectory of the company.
Yeah.
Um, and at the same time, handling people who clearly aren't, because I'm going to encounter them with a bit of like, it doesn't ruin my day, and it's not so annoying that I have to deal with these people and whatever. It's just like, yeah,
Hmm.
there's going to be some people who aren't in a good position to be a positive force for our company, and the cost of finding the ones who are is to talk to some of the ones who aren't. It's like interviewing
Right.
employees. It's not nearly as stressful to interview 20 candidates for a role and have
Right.
15 of them not really be in the running in a serious
Yeah.
way. For
So
whatever reason, talking to 20 investors and having 15 of them like not get it, I think it's because implicitly it doesn't feel like I'm in power,
tell
and
me
I'm
more
not.
about that.
Well, if I have a budget to hire someone and it's my choice who to hire,
Hmm.
like finding people who aren't qualified, but having a phone screen with them or whatever, where I kind of quickly figure out they're probably not right for the role, I just feel totally comfortable. I feel in the driver's seat. Maybe there's something to learn about like our screening process or whatever else, but like it's not a huge deal at all, right?
Yeah.
But if it feels like wow, maybe we don't need this money, but this money would be really useful. Um, and but it's their money. It's their sort of hiring for founders in a way, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of like the mental model. They have the budget, but they're
Sure.
deciding where to spend it,
Hmm.
in terms of capital and in terms of time that they spend
Yeah.
with companies. And it feels uh, like I don't expect. I mean, it's possible. I haven't really, in any serious way, gone to market with this idea yet. Sometimes when you do, like you find yourself in a competitive bid, and it's kind of you, and you're more like the person with the budget making the hire. Usually, the case is though you're more making the sale, at least for the first part, right?
Okay. So
Yeah,
there's a sense that when you're in that pitch or in that conversation, they have more of the power. It's just the kind of like
yeah,
gross generalization, but
yeah.
that's how it feels, right?
Exactly. That's how it
Yeah.
feels, but it's funny because it's kind of like as soon as I say that, I'm like, why am I giving them that?
Why
you
are you
know?
giving them that? Let's take that seriously.
Yeah.
Why are you giving them that?
Um, I think it's really funny because what's coming to mind is that my instinct is I desperately don't want to give them that. And I feel like the only way to not give them that is to just build a company that's growing incredibly quickly and is profitable so that we don't need to raise money. But we
Hmm.
might choose to, but we don't need to. And so every fiber in my being wants to focus on that.
Yeah.
And I probably um, would grow a little bit slower, and the company might not be off to as an amazing trajectory if I did that versus was willing or able or whatever to like raise a little bit more ahead of some of those like, ah, yeah, we're already profitable and we don't need you at all.
Hmm.
But just to be able to go into those conversations like, yeah, like we're growing really fast. We've proven a lot of stuff, but like we're not profitable because we chose to spend more, because we chose to invest in growing faster, because we thought we'd have a great chance of raising money and we can always dial it back. It's not existential kind of a thing. But if you operate in a little bit more of a fear based way, then you don't make the investments because you're avoiding being in a position where you sort of quote need money. And there's varying
Hmm.
degrees of need, but pushing it more into the yellow zone. We never
Yeah.
want to get to the red zone. The green zone is like, we raised 2.5 million and we have 2 million in the bank still 2 years later or whatever. you know,
Sure. Yeah.
but like basically, if you push it a little bit more to the yellow zone, where you're like, because we've got lots of ideas, we could probably hire a little bit more aggressively or spend a little bit more aggressively to pursue some of those ideas or pursue the same set of ideas in a sort of more comprehensive way or bigger way. Um, yeah, I do think a pattern that I've seen is a lot of founders push it a little bit more into the yellow zone, not risking
Yeah.
death of the company, but
Yeah.
anyway, it's
Well,
it's interesting. You can kind of see the loop that goes between it's the way I operate the company and
right.
based on the way I want to relate to investors, where I want to have the power in those conversations.
So I think what you're describing is a very real dynamic. What I will assert is that it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah,
And maybe what I would say on top of that is it doesn't have to be so dictated by the external circumstances.
yeah,
Is the premise I'll start with. I know founders who they go out fundraising and they have 5 months of runway
hmm
to like their yellow red zone, and
I'll
yet
call
they can
5 months
go.
red.
Yeah, yeah,
I'll
yeah,
call
yeah.
it very red. But that's
Yeah, it
funny because
depends
that
on
comes
yeah, it
back to
depends on
my
your
bias
risk
of
profile,
like,
but they also can go out with this openness that you're describing,
yeah,
and without this sense of this person really has power over me,
yeah.
right? And so I'm curious for you, if we take a look, like what is it that you're believing about yourself in that interaction that's saying this person really has power over me. I don't have the power.
The extent to which I feel like their choice dictates whether I get to keep working on this company or not, probably.
Hmm.
And so that's why I'm like, I just really love doing it. I really want to keep working this for a long time. I've had a lot of things in my career that I've loved working on, but for one reason or another, I wasn't able to see it through to the extent that I really wanted to. And
Let me
uh
pause for a second
yeah.
though. Yeah, so I just want to zoom in on that. You said this there's this sense that this person it's up to this person on whether or not I get to continue working on this.
Well, not this person, but I need someone to say yes, kind of a thing. Not any one particular person, but you need someone to say yes to keep going. That
Sure.
sense that it's not just about anymore my choices about like my ability to build a product that generates enough revenue to sustain the team and the infrastructure necessary to keep running the thing.
Yeah.
It's about outside investment needs to come in for this thing to continue.
There's a real dependency.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very real like brass tacks. Like, yes, like we're dependent on external capital, like in this scenario that we're constructing in order for us to continue.
Yeah. Exactly.
And and so in that world where like let's say like yeah, objectively there is this dependency. Let's just call it that. I would imagine that there's like a certain sense of vulnerability that comes with that.
Totally. Totally. And a
What's that like for you?
really um a heightened one for me because uh my last company or a previous company, not my very last company, but in my past, I've had a company that I loved working on and I really believed in. And, we raised a pre-seed, but we couldn't raise a seed. And so we just ran out of cash. And
Yeah.
it was like my bank account was empty, the company bank account was empty. There was nothing I could do except for try and sell it for scraps and like go get a job, basically,
Yeah.
and lay everybody off and shut down the service and all that kind of stuff. And it just was heart wrenching because I loved that thing and I wanted to keep working on it, but I just did money, like I had to be able to pay rent and I had to, you know, I couldn't find any other way. I was sort of, the other thing is by the end of it, because I focused the last, months of the company's life on fundraising, of course, that's kind of uh, it's too late and I was like out of energy and like it's always possible. Like now I feel like I'm in a much better spot where I'm like, okay,
Sure.
I'm never gonna let it get to that point again.
Sure.
But even then it's kind of like and it's good that I'm technical, so I can kind of like just keep the thing running myself and take it down to like skeleton crew for a little while.
Sure.
So I don't really feel like that this has a chance of that happening again, but that was a deep scar tissue of just like it
Yeah.
was so sad to not be able to work on that thing anymore and to have to go get a job, you know?
Yeah. I totally get that. I totally get that. I've been through that. I know many people have been through that.
Yeah.
And if we go back to how we started this, you talked about a desire to go into these conversations with openness,
Yeah.
with there's like an openness to really connecting to the person in front of you, not letting the feedback, whatever it is, like sway you too much,
Yeah. Taking
right?
it evenly, the same way I would take feedback from, like, a friend.
Right.
That's the
So
feeling is if a friend tells me some stuff that I don't think is great advice, I'll either, like, if depending on the type of friend, be candid with them, be like, "I don't know about this for this reasons," or just be like, "Oh, that's a good idea." But either way, it doesn't really affect my mood too much, and
yeah,
I'm able to be pretty open and process the information that is in front of me in, like, an even way. Or, like, same thing if an employee or that,
yeah.
investor, it hits different.
So how much of that emotional scar tissue that you're referring to earlier is coloring the present around taking these things, personally?
Um I mean, yeah, I feel like that's the whole thing, right? It's basically like I've been in this situation before, I don't know, capital T, lowercase t trauma ensued. And it's scary to go back to that possibility space, and to be in that position where it's like, all right, I have to convince you that you should put money into this company. Otherwise, I don't get to keep working on this company. Or not I have to convince you, but I have to convince somebody to put money in this company. So that's
Yeah.
why I'm kind of like steering. very clear of maybe a little too clear of being in a position of needing to raise to the point where it's like, maybe I should be investing a little bit more aggressively and not total cockroach mode kind of a thing.
Yeah. I would imagine like the previous experience was really painful and you're really trying to avoid it.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm. Yeah. So what I'm what I'm noticing is that, when we consider how you're showing up to the situation, raising money, let's call it, the thing that's largely influencing you right now is the fear, right?
Yes.
There's some there's some sense that like fear is fundamentally I'm trying to avoid a particular outcome, right? And one could argue that we're not just avoiding an outcome, but we're avoiding a feeling in that outcome,
Hmm.
right? And so, what's the feeling of that situation that you're trying to avoid? Like what that, or I should just phrase that as like, what's the
Yeah.
feeling you're trying to avoid here?
Painting a picture of like the world that I'm kind of like, oof, that sucked and I don't want to go there again
Yeah.
is this sense that um now I have to go get a job.
Yep.
And I don't really want to get a job. I want to keep working on this thing. I love working on it. I believe in the potential of it. And I love sort of being in control, I think is a huge part of it too.
Hmm.
When you have a job, a lot more is out of your control when you're whatever. Even if it's like it has to go down to the skeleton crew and it's just me. Okay, fine. Like I'm still in control. I'm happy,
Hmm.
you know.
So, is it loss of
Um,
control that
Yeah,
you're
I
really
think
trying to
probably
avoid
that's
here?
the underlying thing is just this feeling of not being in control. And it's a thing that I've hated about previous jobs at times is like it's amazing when you're aligned with what the people who kind of have power in the company,
Hmm.
usually the founders, right, want. And then when you're not, it's really painful.
Mm.
Um, and so I'd
Yeah.
rather just avoid that and do the things that I think make sense and hopefully they work out in the marketplace kind of deal.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
rather than have to convince someone of a thing or try and convince myself to get aligned with their thing. I basically that's a problem I've had in my life generally is I'm not very good at convincing myself to get aligned with something that deep down I'm not aligned with. If I don't think it's a great idea, but someone else wants me to do it, it's hard for me to set it aside and be like, oh, maybe I'm wrong. I'll go do it. Let's see how it
Well,
goes.
yeah. So, the key thing I hear in that is that there's a situation where you end up having to trying to convince yourself to get aligned, right? And in my experience, um, you're either aligned with something or you're not.
Hmm.
Trying to convince yourself to get aligned is almost like a contradiction in terms.
I also find that I have weirdly specific preferences. Like, I
Hmm.
think maybe it's easier for other types of people who are like really happy having jobs, where like someone else is their boss telling them what to do for a long period of time, is like they just don't, it's kind of fine with them either way. Like, they have some things they care about, but like the thing that I kind of care about is like overall, what are we doing? What are we betting on?
Yeah.
That's what I ultimately care about most is like, what's our bet? And that's like a founder level call, right? Um, if I was like just, oh, I love writing code or I love designing really cool interfaces, then it would be very easy for me to be like, tell me what interface to design. Like, what's a good interface? What's a good problem I should solve? I'll go solve it. But I'm like, I want to pick the problem, you know?
Hmm.
And so I find myself frequently, I think you're right, that if you are in a position where you're kind of needing to convince yourself to get aligned, like that's a hard position to be in. And maybe it's better for everyone if you're like, well, we're not aligned. So maybe it doesn't make sense for me to be in this role. I feel like I'd be switching roles a lot, because I like have specific things that get me excited,
So,
and a lot
yeah.
of, by default things don't get me excited
So,
enough to.
so part of what I hear in that is this sense that I can't get sufficient control and alignment unless I'm a founder.
Yeah, I mean, intellectually, it's less like I can't, and it's more like it's hard, and it's less probable, it's less likely. Whereas, as a founder, or you know, the other like the times in my career when I've had a best time being an employee is I reported directly to a founder, and I had wide leeway over a big thing that I was working on and basically in charge of, and we had
Hmm.
a great relationship, and he was almost more like an investor than a boss. He was just like, "Do your thing. I trust you. It's
Yeah.
working. Keep going."
Great.
That's the kind of I'd be totally happy in a situation like that, probably.
Okay.
until something else happens and the board decides something or that founder leaves
Sure.
or
But a
whatever. It's
high
sort of,
degree of
yeah,
autonomy, agency, control is really important to you.
yeah,
And more specifically, there's a certain scope of autonomy that's really important.
yeah.
Yeah. And so what I hear connecting back to the investor conversation is that when you're in that investor conversation, there's like a lot of stakes there for you. It's like if you don't get this right, or if you don't get that person on your side, then you might lose that ultimately.
Totally. Because not only maybe they don't make the decision to put money in, but maybe they do. And then they have the ability to exert a lot of control, not necessarily any one person or at this stage or whatever, but like over time, you're decreasing your control, basically.
Yeah, especially if you're on the venture funded route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So
like, that's the other part of it that makes it scary is what if I have this person that I now have no ability to fire that ends up like not being aligned?
so there's a little like damned if you do, damned if you don't almost.
A little, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, but the thing is, it's damned if I do, damned if I don't, kind of. But it's more like there are risks of it working that I'm wary of, and there are risks of it not working that I'm also very wary of.
Yeah.
And I'm just heightened sensitivity to the risks. I don't believe that there are no upsides or that the risks will definitely happen. So it's kind of less like damned if I do, damned if I don't. It's more like it's just risky, you know.
Of
And I'm
course.
and I and I'm I have heightened attunement to the risks because of my past experiences.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so, like, as you're mapping this out and you're getting in touch with all this, I'm just going to keep going back to that question. Then, so when you describe this sense of like being open, warm, connected, perhaps, right, being able to see like, oh, this person I could really get them on board and partner with them. Like, yes, I hear like there's a scar tissue. There's like this attunement. There's this high like attunement to the risk there. What would have to change in order for you to actually have that openness that you're describing?
Well, that's the thing I don't know. And this is what I always get to in various points of therapy is I feel like you said, I can kind of articulate the deal. Like if you were like I can recite the sort of like cognitive behavioral therapy like reframe of like more accurately kind of understanding the situation. Like I can do all that. I'm very good at doing that. And
Yeah.
then I have a meeting with an investor and I sit down and we start talking and 10 minutes in, I'm just like, fuck this person. you
Let's
know?
stay with that. Let's stay with that for a
Yeah.
second.
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck
Yeah.
this person.
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you say fuck this person, how do
Yeah.
you feel in your body?
Angry.
Great. Where do you feel that anger in your body?
Uh gut, shoulders, chest. It's like a visceral get the fuck away from my business kind
Uh-huh.
of a feeling. Like it's like a protective like like the whole like mama bear oxytocin thing, it's like that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like fight or flight. It's protecting.
Yeah. It's more on the fight than the flight. to be honest now,
Sure.
and it's funny cuz earlier in my career it was way more flight and now it's more like leave me alone so I can build this business. I
Okay.
don't want you infecting it. Kind of a thing.
Cool. I want to
Yeah.
invite you to get closer to that feeling though.
Yeah. I'm
So
right
rather
here
than
with it.
talking about it, I want to
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
be with it.
Yep.
Yeah. And so just as you're with that, you said it's protecting. What is it protecting? What needs protection
Um the
in you?
thing the vision basically like the thing that I want to build. There's like I think the experience I have is like there's this precious, really fragile thing that's worth pulling on and it's so easily misunderstood, so hard to see. Like some people get it. I find in general
Is
if
is that the thing that you're protecting against? The feeling of being misunderstood?
no it, well maybe I guess my first instinct is more just like what I'm protecting against is uh someone who doesn't get it and shouldn't be a part of it becoming inextricably a part of it. Or depending on someone to get it who they think they get it or whatever. Maybe I'm almost more afraid of people of like the wrong type of person getting excited about it and needing to take their money than I am about people not getting excited about it. Because then it's like there's no transaction that's taken place. Now, it's actually, this is very useful because now that I'm really getting into the feeling of it, it is a feeling of I don't care if I'm misunderstood as long as I'm not stopped from doing the thing.
Yeah. So there's a scenario where this person doesn't really get it. They're getting involved. And then what happens? What is it that you're imagining happens then?
It becomes this is such a strong and extreme word that sounds weird, but like debased, right?
Great.
There's something pure and they're debasing it.
Okay. So I just want you to pause, slow down, and stay with that.
Yeah.
So something gets debased.
hmm
And then the feeling that comes up for you internally then is what?
Probably a little bit of shame. Why did I let this person fuck this up? You
Mm.
know, like we had something that was very good. It was on the right track. And out of fear, we like brought these other people in. They didn't quite get it. They pushed for us to build it in the wrong way. Not wrong, just different. They
Yep.
didn't get it. We're not
Yep.
unfolding our thing anymore. It's this other thing that's ugh,
Yeah.
what is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
You
It's no
know?
longer the thing that you were really
It's not the
envisioning.
baby anymore. It's not the baby. It's just this, you know,
Yeah.
piece
So,
of their portfolio that they're pushing for it to become based on their ideas what they think it should be, but they don't actually understand. They're like
great.
a money person.
So tell me more about the shame that you just saw.
The shame is for kind of like the weakness of not rejecting that early.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think I get so like the whole mama bear oxytocin thing of like get the fuck away is like wanting to be strong and protect the thing, which
Yeah.
I do think is a like again, I think it's a venture scale thing. The thing I'm excited about is a big thing. Also, all sorts of it's like tale as old as time. Entrepreneur is excited about a thing, they want to build it in a certain way, they want to do it right. There's like a person who seems aligned, but like ultimately kind of isn't. That like has probably a overlapping but kind of different vision for it.
Yep.
Ends up through subtle and unsubtle ways influencing it towards that path. Entrepreneur gets disillusioned, no longer is happy running their own business, no longer feels at home in their own business. They probably feel shame or regret about choices they've made. They don't feel like they've done right by their customers. They don't feel like they really built the thing they wanted to build. And then they leave and they're like, maybe they even make a lot of money out of it, but they're like, what the hell happened?
So
It
is that the
feels
thing
there's something
ultimately that?
almost spiritual about unfolding an idea in the way that makes sense to you according to your own true principles. And I think that's what people admire about like a Steve Jobs or like even like right now, like much obviously smaller example, but like linear. It's like, yeah, they're doing it their way, you know? And like people
Mhm.
like that because there's something inspirational about it. There's something spiritual about building a thing that you dream of.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's actually getting emotional now. I want to build the thing I'm dreaming of. I don't want to build the thing that the money person dreams of.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
want
and
to
the thing
invite
I
you to
dream of
just
would be
stay
a
with
big
that.
thing. It's just,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Stay with that.
yeah.
Yeah. There's a feeling here that just came up.
It's just that I think it's sadness that some of the other things that I've wanted to build that I've dreamt of that have kind of died, you know?
Yeah.
Not kind of, they died.
Yeah.
And I could maybe resurrect them or do a new version of them or whatever, but
There's loss there.
yeah.
Yeah. It's
It's
like one of
weird
the
the whole
hardest
idea of
things.
like it's my baby kind of a thing. It's obviously not I have kids. This is not the same. But there is this sense of like when you really pour your heart into something and then it doesn't work, but you still feel like it could have.
Yeah.
It's sad,
There's a grieving process
and I
there.
really don't want that to happen for this. So hence the mom bear get the fuck away. Yeah,
Yeah. I can totally see that. Being a repeat founder, especially, is tightly fused with having to deal with that loss, the sadness, things not working out.
yeah, for sure. I think
But I want to
also,
reflect something real quick,
yeah,
John. The other
gotta
thing
get
that
my
that
my
I want
fake
to
name
reflect
straight.
here is that part of that sadness that you're in touch with is only possible because you deeply, deeply care.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you deeply care. I can tell. And so it's probably part of what makes you really effective. And it's also what is going into these investor meetings that it's going to be rocket fuel,
Yeah,
right? This level of caring, right? And you're present to this protective instinct
yeah.
so that you don't have to feel that loss again.
I think also this is so important. This is becoming more clear to me. I've had a couple experiences in my career where I felt like, oh, I'm trying to like be open to this way or whatever, and like it would be better for everyone if I like grew to be open to this thing. And in the end, actually, like I should have just said fuck that thing all along.
Hmm.
Like I sort of thought you were supposed to have co-founders. I thought like it's important to have co-founders, you know,
Yeah.
like Y Combinator just says it, so it's got to be true,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Obviously.
Um,
Yeah.
it's like make something people want and like have two 20 something technical co-founders. Like
Hmm.
that's you know what I mean.
Yeah. The
But
unquestioned doctrine. Yeah.
anyway, I'm so much happier. This is the first time I've been a solo founder, and I'm so much happier. And I'm just like I might have a co-founder again for something I do in the future, but like default is no for sure. And like I kind of feel like maybe there's something similar about like I'm supposed to raise that other round right now. I should be open to it. It's blah blah blah. But it's like maybe I'm not. Like, and it doesn't mean actually that I'm not interested in building a venture scale big thing or whatever. Because like if I tell you about the thing I'm dreaming of, it's obvious that if it works, even in like a kind of we got part of the way their way, but like something about it worked. Like that, it is a venture scale idea, but maybe it's that same kind of deal, but I can just instead of learning the lesson the super hard way, like go with my instinct again and just be like focus on getting to profitability first,
Mm.
and then it's truly like a if you want in, it's on our terms kind of a deal, and there's no
Uh-huh.
like we're in all the position of strength, you know.
Great. Let's test it out
Yeah,
for a second.
sure.
So, so let's just say that we had the magical ability to delete any sense that you should be raising money.
Hmm.
And now all I'm going to do is ask you to just feel into like, what is that you want to do with this business in the present moment?
Hmm.
What comes up?
There's kind of two things. One, for sure, the primary thing is like grow. Just grow revenue, get profitable. We don't need to spend a lot more. We just need to execute. We need time. We've got time. We are executing. Growth has picked up lately. It feels great. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. Heads down. Right. That's like 80%. 20% is, yeah, but we're cutting it a little close. And like probably unless things really, really start to pick up, I'm gonna have to dial some stuff back that's gonna be a little bit painful to dial back. It's not like going to total cockroach mode, but it's you know, it would be so nice if I could like the thing that would be great is if I could just have like our existing people put more in at terms that I like. Because then it's
Great.
kind of like there's no new people in the deal. But like, the model if you're a seed fund is kind of like you have to be pretty careful about if you're gonna like do these sort of extensions and
Sure.
whatever. And it's really nice to get the validation from follow-on investors that like you're not the only one who thinks this is exciting and all that. I understand why they have the model that they have. Um But, yeah, that would be the snap my fingers thing is like, I'm willing to take on a little more dilution, and it would be nice to have a little more padding to do the things we're currently doing in like a slightly more robust, nicer way. Because uh, we've got an ambitious like thing that we're building, and we've got a really really small team. When we tell people our team size, it's kind of
Yeah.
like wow,
Let's
So
assume that those things could, like, you knew you could get that. Let's
yeah,
assume that that 80%, like, you knew you could execute and that
hmm
you knew that you could go make a deal happen with your
hmm
existing insiders. How would that feel?
great. Yeah, just great. I would immediately be able to take two people that are part time and make them full time, and just know that we have that much more revenue to execute. Sorry, that much more runway to execute to get to profitability or whatever else. But like that would be great. Now it's kind of like we can do it, but it's kind of pretty close, and we're
Sure.
scraping by with a lot of things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So let's just imagine, like, step into that movie for a moment. So, like, you're
sure.
there fully. Let's just say
Yeah,
that firing on all cylinders. You got the extra padding. Right? Like, just pretend that's true for a moment.
Hmm.
And then now you go back to this whole thing, going out to the market, raising the next like real like quote unquote round.
Yeah.
Like, what do you notice you feel as you're looking toward that?
Like, am I assuming that we raised the extra money now from the same people? We got the extra padding. We hired the people full time. We accelerated in the way that we think we'll accelerate if we put our foot on the gas a little harder on some of the things that we're currently working on. And then now we're like profitable or really close to
Yeah.
profitable. Like kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, that's great. Honestly, if I can go to investors with just like I'm profitable and I'm growing fast and I'm open to taking on some more dilution because we've got some specific things we want to do, and it would be great to add more really great people around the board. But only if they're really great people, kind of a thing. That's
Yeah.
amazing. I feel in control. I feel great. Um, because then it's like it's truly like no skin off my back if you don't want to invest, or if I don't want you to invest, or if we like each other, but we can't come to terms that feel like they make sense.
Right.
Um, that feels great. Um, if I'm kind of like, I'm asking you to bet early, a lot of stuff is like working, but like in a nascent way, like 6 more months data would probably really mean a lot to see if the growth continues with this stuff versus like it was the pop and then kind of flattened or whatever. It's just kind of like, it feels a lot less. I feel like I'm asking them to bet on something that's more like, there's a spectrum from like team and dream to
Hmm. Hmm.
traction.
Yeah.
And it would be much nicer for the next round to be like just total traction and we're profitable anyway. So
Yeah.
if you
What I hear from that is, if you were to get to the other side of that traction story, you personally would be feeling much more confident about what you're asking them to invest in.
totally, because yeah, I mean, that's the other thing is if let's say well, they put in the money and then a lot of the stuff that we're doing like doesn't work as well as we hope, which sometimes that happens, you know, then it's like, oh shit,
Yeah.
you know,
And that's also when
yeah,
investors tend to get more involved.
yeah. Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. So anyway, yeah, to me that's why I'm kind of like it makes sense to just keep focusing, and that's our to be clear, that's like our plan. Like I'm not like gearing up to fundraise, before the end of the year or something like that. Like we're speaking at the end of October. If it was sort of like I got a whole bunch of convos lined up for November and we want to close the round in like December, January, or whatever, like that would be one thing. But no, we're not. We're just focused on growth. But
Yeah.
I know that I think in general, even the conversation with our existing investors about what the next round will look like, they already brought up all this stuff, which is why I wanted to talk about it. But it is kind of interesting. I do think I'm feeling more like conviction around like, yeah, let's just really keep focusing on growing revenue. It's working. Let's just keep making it work. It's really
Yeah.
hard to make it work. It takes a lot of focus. Like I'm gonna worry about that. And also manage the business in such a way that assuming we don't get any more money. Assuming no more investment.
Yeah.
So aggressive, but like it can't die, kind of a thing.
Right. Right.
So yeah,
Yeah. Well, John, as we start to wrap, I want to check in with you and ask. We touched on quite a few different things here today. Um, what are you taking away from the conversation?
the most important thing is like actually to listen to the mama bear thing. That's like get away from my business
Hmm.
and to just keep unfolding the thing that only our team can really see, right? And um, it's a really sensitive and delicate thing to ask someone before it really is obvious to buy in. And inevitably, they have to do so somewhat blindly, you know? And so it's kind of a miracle when that does work, when like a seed or
Yeah.
pre-seed investor like actually ends up. And I think it's probably best for pre-seed and seed investors to be just basically supportive and you're kind of betting on founders. And that's the way that the best ones do it. They're not trying to like manage it too much.
Right.
Um, and I mean, I could probably be I could probably be a little bit more open to like, well, there are some people who might do the next round that's kind of like a seed extension or series seed or whatever that do share that philosophy and they provide really great ideas, but they don't threaten any. real, like, we're gonna make you do it our way kind of a, we're
Hmm.
gonna try,
Yeah.
kind of a thing. Um, and so I probably should be more open to the existence of those people, but it's probably actually right for me 10 minutes in a meeting when someone doesn't get it and they seem like not really aligned to just be, I could be nice about it, but it doesn't have to make me feel nervous at all because I think I've got a little bit of residual, like I'm depending on them that I'm really not significantly anymore. Like I think we're already at the point revenue wise where, like, if I had to take it down to skeleton crew,
Yeah.
I would be able to and keep it going. And financially, like, I'm in a much better place now. And there's just a lot of stuff that's different about now versus
Yeah. It's easy to
6 years
forget
ago
that that's
or
an
whatever the
option.
last thing that I wrote. It's like been, yeah, it's been more, it's been like 8 years since that scenario. So it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
I've so much has changed, but emotionally, it's like, well, that's the last time I did that was. So I guess it's
Yeah.
like the emotions are kind of cached somewhere in my like, oh, you're in this situation. Here's what to feel, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And if we had more time together, I would also just invite you to spend more time with those feelings so that they wouldn't have to be so cached.
yeah, that is very true too. What do you think is the like? Because the thing that I noticed that was really interesting is you asking me to like stay with like get the fuck away from my business feeling. What It seems like there's a thing that's like, oh, we tend to resist wanting to go there emotionally. Like if it starts to come up, it's like, ooh, put that away. That's dangerous because then
Yeah.
it'll make me super rude during these investor meetings and pre-reject people and all this stuff. And you're kind of
Right.
like, no, stay with it. I'm
Yeah.
curious what the deal is. How
Yeah.
does that work?
So generally, when we're repressing an emotion, because that's in some sense that makes sense for us to do that. It's protective. It's really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
We might convince ourselves that the emotion is like too dangerous to have. It's gonna ruin my meeting. Well, emotions are meant to be felt.
Yeah.
They're the experiences that are demanding to be felt one way or the other. And so when we are in, let's call them like much more activating scenarios,
Hmm.
um, then that's where we're going to be likely. It's more likely we're going to get triggered and reactive
Yeah.
versus the alternative, which is, oh, if we can actually intentionally, consciously allow ourselves to feel whatever it is that we've been suppressing, whether that's anger, fear, sadness, joy. I mean, there's a whole number of these things. Then, in essence, what we allow ourselves to do is build our capacity to be with those feelings,
Hmm.
right? They're not so scary anymore for us, right? And then, as a result, when they do pop up again, they're not going to overwhelm us so much.
Yeah. Interesting. So the thing that's very new for me here is I didn't realize coming into this conversation that I kind of thought, oh, I've got this mama bear instinct, which is bad, and I need your help with it because it's going to ruin my chances of raising money from investors because I like pre-reject them.
Yeah.
And actually, it's kind of like, no, the mama bear instinct's pretty good. And like, if you have someone that you're just really not vibing with, just go with it. And like, whatever. Maybe there's a different version of you that would vibe with them for whatever other reason, but like, whatever. It, it's fine. Like, do the thing of focusing on just making a really great business that you're in control of your own destiny. And um when you feel comfortable doing that because you're sort of embracing that, all of a sudden maybe I'm a little bit more open. Maybe when I'm talking to investors, I'm less worried about am I going to pre-reject them or are they going to reject me or whatever. And I'm just focused on my business and
Yeah.
good things could happen. But it's kind of funny because it's sort of like the solution is almost like to there's like a thing I'm worried about. And so, but if I like actually just kind of lean into that, then it's like less likely to happen
More
in a
often than
weird way.
not, it's the resistance that
Yeah.
actually is the obstacle.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
to paraphrase it, it's what we resist persists, right?
Right.
And so my what I would encourage you to do, John, is specifically with that mama bear
Mhm.
impulse, is to get more familiar with it, move closer toward it,
Yeah.
really see if you can inquire into its contours. When does it come up? What tends to activate it?
Yeah.
Um, uh, what are the things about it that you can appreciate, and also where the places where perhaps it's not serving your interests. There's a whole field of exploration that's possible there.
Yeah.
So that's what I would encourage you to consider.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Love that. I think that's gonna help because it's definitely not just investors that trigger that. It's just anything that feels like a threat to the vision,
Yeah,
which evolves,
that's right.
which
That's
is
right.
kind of funny because one thing that seemed like a huge threat to the vision a year ago, now we're doing, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah,
It changes. Yeah.
yeah,
But anyway,
absolutely.
cool.
Awesome. Well, John, thank you so much for spending the time today.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Today's conversation opened up something fascinating about how we relate to our protective instincts as founders. When we began, John viewed their visceral "get away from my business" response as a liability, an emotional reaction that needed fixing. Yet as we dug deeper, a different picture emerged. That protective instinct wasn't just emotional baggage from past experiences. It was actually pointing toward a deeper truth about their vision for the company. The venture capital path presents founders with a profound paradox. The very investment that could accelerate a company's growth often comes with the risk of losing control over its direction. Stories abound of founders whose companies grew beyond their original vision, shaped by the pressures and expectations of their investors. Some founders look back and barely recognize the company they started. Yet what our guest discovered was that their protective response, this instinct to maintain control, wasn't necessarily at odds with building a venture scale business. Rather than fighting against it, they realized that they could use it as guidance to build the company on their own terms first, engaging with investors from a position of strength rather than necessity. For the founders listening, think about your own protective responses, those instincts that feel almost primal in their intensity. Instead of seeing them as problems to solve, what might happen if you got curious about what they're trying to tell you about the company that you want to build? Thanks for tuning in today. If you found value in this episode, I'd love for you to share it with another founder in your life. And if you have a moment, leaving a rating or review helps other founders discover these conversations. Until next time, this has been Slow Down to Speed Up.